right, welcome back to another episode of Navigating Adulthood and IDD. Today I'm so excited. I have my friend and colleague, Kathleen Martins, a yoga instructor and mental health specialist who provides services through her business Beyond Mental Space. Hi, Kathleen, welcome.
Hi, thank you for the intro. So glad to be here and to talk about things with you today.
Yeah, of course. So to start, would you mind introducing yourself and maybe telling us a little bit about your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like Bonnie said, my name is Kathleen Martins. I am a mental health provider in the community, and my background really is I have a master's in clinical rehabilitation counseling. So, how I like to describe that to people is it's truly a mix of the mental and physical health of our bodies. So, it's taking in account our bodies as a whole. We all have modifications that we need in our space, whether that's work or life in some way. And what I'm really passionate about is helping individuals live fulfilling lives, helping individuals find ways to do daily tasks in their lives, whatever that is. A lot of times we think about work and being able to be in the community, but I also just love helping support the fun side of things, right? Like we have things that we enjoy doing and we have things that we need to do. So that's where kind of my yoga background comes in too. I'm a 200-hour registered yoga teacher and also accessible yoga train. So that really just helps me meet our community where they are, whether they're kids, teens, and even through their adult lives.
That's awesome. And I love that emphasis on like the fun part of life too, because I
Yeah.
think while it's a very important discussion and this podcast is covered in episodes and probably will in future episodes like employment for adults with disabilities and like finding the best situations for people, I think it's important to also not lose sight of like this aspect of like life should also be fun and
Yeah,
and fun for
exactly.
everybody.
I know. Like, I think a lot of times, even, and I can speak for myself here in my life, I think about work and what to do. And sometimes we forget, even as adults, we need to bring in the fun side of things. We need to, bring in our self-care, of course, keep our mental health, safe and good, but also, yeah, how can we make it fun? And really, I worked a lot. I've been working in this field for over 6 years now. And I say that, I'm like, wow, it's been so long. Started working with school age kids. And that's really where, I was able to do all those fun activities and stuff like that. And for the past 3 years or so, I've started working more with adults. And I got into the community in helping individuals, find work, find things to help them be accessible with work and stuff. And that's when talking about it, that's when things really shifted for me. I'm like, wait, it's not just about that. How do we help them be in the community to do these activities that we're talking about to keep things fun? And that's life, it's about the balance.
Oh, for sure. And I also relate to like trying to find the balance too. So,
Yes. The everyday struggle, and I always think, okay, I'm mindful of it. I'm aware. So some days are more work and hustle focused. Some days are more relaxing and just feeling, those needs and resting or whatever it may be.
yeah, for sure. So, I'm excited to dive into the yoga a bit. So, what does yoga for adults with disabilities look like?
Yeah. So, we've talked a little bit about me and my business with Beyond Mental Space. And truly, I've always had the yoga, mindfulness, and all that in my life and bringing it to this community. And truly, this past year, it's probably been over a year now. What's really helped me bring yoga to the community is Guided by Humanity. So you can find me at Guided by Humanity as a teacher there as well. And how we bring yoga to the community is we work with different day programs and we also have community classes. So, again, helping bring the accessible piece to every individual. I work with different individuals that may be doing yoga from a seat. or maybe have a limited mobility in their upper body, but helping them still work through movements, helping bring in all the props. I always say all the props, whether it's books, blankets, bolsters, chairs, even for individuals that can stand or sit. We do a lot of different chair yoga or on the mat or standing. So truly, what I love about this community and what we're able to do is meet individuals where they are. So we meet them where they are and we work through that. We work through, a lot of people may even think tree pose. How would I do that if I'm seated in a chair? There's lots of different ways. And it's a passion of mine. I love talking about it. I could go on for days, but what really makes it fun and rewarding is just seeing these individuals light up in a space to where they maybe thought they didn't have access to. Guided by Humanity is also the first nonprofit and accessible yoga space here in Denver, and that's huge. We're reaching a community that didn't have access to this before. So we do, and in meeting individuals where they are, that can be in person, it could be in a group, it can be private, it can be online. In the world that we know today, a lot of things is, okay, here's the Zoom link.
Right.
So just supporting individuals through that and helping their care providers also support them through different things in bringing in yoga and mindfulness and even meditation.
I love all of that so much, and like
Yeah,
when you're like props and like bringing
I
in all the
know.
props, and
Even, yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
and just like the individual aspect of it.
Mhm.
It's something like I really resonate with, and I think that's really exciting. And that you guys do provide so many different options. Like, yeah, it can
Mhm.
be individual, it can be in a group. We can use this prop, we can use this prop. What are your needs? You can do
Exactly.
yoga.
Yeah, I like to see it as like there aren't any limits. I think about when I even started yoga and being scared in class of like, I didn't know what I was doing, or do I pick up a block? No one else is picking up a block. What do I do? And it took me a while to even start to learn my body and what I needed in the moment. And I think that I started to pick up on that on my own. And really now I'm passionate about giving that to others as a teacher. So always letting people know, you know your body best. So what's comfortable for you right now? Maybe it's child's pose with two bolsters. Maybe it's a blanket on top, like that's how I love just starting my class is like, listen to your body. Maybe you don't know what that is right now, but I think through each class and each session, just diving into yourself, you learn that more and more. And being comfortable with grabbing more blocks. I don't want people to think, like, oh, if I make this a little more accessible or if I use more modifications, it's a bad thing. It's like, no, it's actually an even better thing because it's showing that your body. You're listening to your body in your needs and you're giving that to yourself. So I really focus on the empowerment of being in class and learning your body. And that's what yoga in that space is about, like I'm the teacher as in I'm the registered yoga teacher. That's all I am, and I'm there to guide people through the class, but really, I think the focus in class is guiding yourself through your own body, through breath and movements, and just learning yourself a little more each time.
That's beautiful. And I feel, and this might be a lot of my own experience with yoga. I do at home yoga now, and I've
Yeah.
gotten into a pretty good practice. So I really like, I love yoga. I love the practice of it. And I love that you guys can provide this for adults with disabilities. Because I feel like kind of, and you can correct me if I'm like wrong, but I feel like culturally, like in America, yoga sometimes like is perceived kind of weird. Like I feel like I took a
Yeah.
class or I've taken classes in the past and they're intense and I feel
Yes.
intimidated and I don't go back. And I could see
Yes.
how, if you need any kind of adaptation, you could feel intimidated in those spaces. as well too. And I'm, that's probably something with American culture and working
Mhm.
out and whatever.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah, no, totally. And I agree with you 100%. And before becoming a yoga teacher, I think all those, like you're saying, those experiences and kind of like feeling intimidated and knowing that yoga is something that I enjoy, but then going into different spaces and maybe I've had some places where I didn't feel welcome because I looked different than other people, or I wasn't as advanced as other people. And yeah, definitely, like you're saying, I think here the culture of yoga is like power yoga or like hot yoga, that's
yeah.
like doing yoga to get that full workout in. And I'm like, okay, I love that and all, but where's the true meaning of yoga? And I think that
Right.
truly, led me to, well, I know what I want. And then it was like, okay, I think that that need is out there. Like you're saying, I've talked to many people who are like, I went to a class, it did not go well, and I'm never going back. And it's like, man, no, yoga is so much more beautiful than that.
Right.
And yeah, I think that truly just even opened my eyes to like, wow, I'm really passionate about this. And sometimes we turn our passion into something we can change and something we can do. So I made it an active movement, right, for myself to be like, okay, I want this to be different for other people too, because I know I'm not the only one.
Right. And the
And
more, and like, at least my understanding of yoga, it's very light, but I've learned, like, I'm starting to learn more of the actual principles of yoga. It aligns
yeah.
so much more with, like, the work you do and the work Guided by Humanity does and
Mhm.
making these spaces accessible. And it's like, that's really like the heart of yoga. So it's interesting that America makes it kind of like, work out, you got to get in shape, but it's almost
Fast
kind of
pace.
ableist in that
Yeah.
way, where it's like you got to be this certain kind of body type and be this flexible. So there's like
Right.
this ableist kind of yoga over here that we should
Yeah,
get rid of.
exactly. I'm like, yeah, let's like move to push that away. Like how can we, and that's what I love about Guided by Humanity, what I do and what we do as a community is yeah, we're bringing light to situations of like that's not accessible to everyone. And a lot of people feel uncomfortable there, even down
Mm-hmm.
to what you're wearing.
Right.
I've gone into classes and I'm like, I don't look like I feel uncomfortable by what I'm wearing and what the like name of things are. And that's not the like base of yoga. It's really, and like you're saying, I think the connection of yoga and mental health in this space that we work in, to me, that aligns a lot with the principles of yoga and what we do in making things accessible. And even if it's just breathing or moving, self-care, yoga goes beyond the mat. And that's where I really dive deep into my practice with even, a lot of people that I work with is that emphasis. Emphasis on, I feel like all the props in the world that you need in learning your body. And how do you take yoga off the mat? How do you continue these principles or these things to make you a stronger person, you a better person to meet your needs? There's a lot, like you're saying, there's a lot of focus on, oh, we have to look this certain way and we have to work out to be all these things. And it's like at the end of the day, what is that doing for you? What is that doing for your mental health?
I love that. And I love the connection back to mental health.
Mm-hmm.
And just, I love like talking about how it's yoga's not just on the mat, it's what's off the mat too. It's almost like a mindset. And so it's interesting because it's like a hobby, but it can,
Yeah.
but it's a hobby that's like really good for you.
Yeah. I know, definitely. I think I go through these like what's my weekly focus? And then if you find me in a class during that week, it's gonna be all about one thing. So yeah, like this week I'm like, okay, I'm finding myself in like the grounding area. So like all my classes and like introducing grounding, and that can be physically grounding. How do we ground our body to feel our surroundings? And how do we ground our minds, our mental space? So yeah, the connection of it all is truly beautiful. And I think just the awareness that I'm able to bring to people, whether it's something small on take 3 deep breaths when you're stressed out, that can resonate with someone and really help them through a hard time. Or okay, today we're focusing on grounding in tree pose. And that can really help someone with helping them feel motivated, like they accomplished something. So, yeah, bringing full circle, later on in life and in the moment with mental health and our space, especially right now, the time we're in, all these changes that we're seeing in the world. I'm like, I think that these past few months, the past year, that's what led me to be like, okay, I'm on to something here. I'm not the only one. There's a need in the community. Here are the needs. This is what I'm passionate about. And that's truly what brought me to be like, okay, here's the foundation of Beyond Mental Space.
But one thing I'm interested in is, and I feel like you just kind of mentioned it a little bit, is like with COVID-19, have you seen like a shift in your practice with adults, like a need for more mindfulness? And like, how have you kind of met those needs in the community?
Absolutely. Definitely a shift and a need going along with what I was just talking about, being in the grounding mode. I've just seen, and a lot of times I use terms that to other people, they may use other terms to define it. But what I'm hearing from individuals, adults, caregivers, I can kind of dive into that too a little bit after. But with individuals that I work with too, it's when are we going back to in person? When can I see you? Am I going to wear a mask next time I see you? So there's a lot of uncertainty. And what I hear is I'm kind of all over the place. Grounding is needed. How do we feel into the space of where we are right now? There's a lot of bouncing around. And I know for me too, is what's next week going to look like? When am I going to be off virtual? When am I going to be able to have kind of a bigger group? A lot of things are limited right now. So being able to meet again people where they are and giving the assurance of we can't control everything. What can we control right now? So that aligns with the mental health piece and teaching different coping skills. It aligns with yoga and teaching breathing techniques. I think that these past few months, I've had so much focus on different breathing skills than I ever have before. I always come back to grounding. Okay, before we respond or do, or if we're feeling all over the place, how can we ground ourselves without breathing? So there's definitely been a lot of hot topics lately in helping support individuals. And in this time of COVID and the unknown, so many things in their life, things that people have enjoyed doing and haven't had access to. Not because it's at this point in time, not because it's not accessible, but because of COVID and what is going on, like not having actual access to things right now is harder than ever before. And that also, I think in the community too, in our society, brings awareness to accessibility for all. When things shut down, when things totally change, people went into uh-oh mode and freak out mode. How are we going to continue our lives? How are we going to continue work? How are we going to continue fulfilling our mental space and being okay? I think at the beginning of things, a lot of us were okay, but then we were soon like, oh my gosh, I'm not okay. What's happening? And I think it's huge. Sometimes it takes hard things or bad things to happen to bring awareness. And I truly think, through COVID and everything that's happened, it's brought more awareness to just accessibility, accessibility to all individuals. It kind of had to happen that way to bring awareness to people outside of the community that we may be a part of, to be like, oh, we need to bring more accessibility. And to me, I'm like, aha, see?
Yeah, it's like, please hold on to that thought after the
Yes,
pandemic.
exactly. Yes. I'm like, can we all remember this moment? And can we all see the importance of when we bring up accessibility and when we bring adapting to others and bringing in that extra assistance for it? Can we all remember this moment? To where you and I and other people may not have thought, we'd need different modifications in these ways. Can we think about that and think about how it feels for us, and then expand that a little more? And then we start to think about, what about people that have been experiencing this way before the pandemic,
Right.
experiencing it even harder now? And then after everything is said and done, they will continue to experience this. So, like you're saying, can we hold on to this? Can we continue this conversation even after the fact, when, in the future,
Yeah.
when we kind of, some things
Or now.
yeah, or now, can
Whenever
we,
people want to jump on the accessibility train.
exactly, let's continue, because I think that some things that we've kind of had to modify, and the whole virtual world has truly opened up. I don't think that that's going away. There are a lot of things that aren't going to go back to how it was and how we were with interaction and communication. So yeah, let's hold on to this and think about the community that truly, needs to continue to have accessibility to things. And how do we make that happen? How do we start those conversations? How do we continue those conversations? How do we bring voice to those that need those conversations to allow them to truly be heard?
I 100% agree. And hopefully this podcast can be one way, hopefully,
Yes.
that people can continue those conversations. You've kind of inspired me. I want to kind of challenge listeners, like, think about like an experience in the pandemic where you had to adapt something for yourself. How did that feel, like not having
Yeah.
that accessible right away?
Right.
So we can start to build this empathy and continue, because people with disabilities are having a harder time right now because the gaps just gotten bigger,
Bigger.
unfortunately. And so it's kind of like, yes, after the pandemic and now, since that's kind of a blurry timeline always. How can we acknowledge that and use maybe our own experiences to motivate us to look for opportunities to actively make things more accessible for others?
I agree. Yeah, I love that too. And a lot of times, for us to truly see things, we have to experience it ourselves. And that doesn't mean that, some people weren't neglecting this. It was
Right.
a lot of it could just comes to, not many people have had this experience, so they just didn't know. So I truly think that, I mean, it's been magical in a sense that this term even has just been brought more to light. And the term accessibility, how do we bring that to people? So even just that in itself, it's like, okay, we're moving forward.
Right.
We're continuing to move forward. All right, this has come to light. Now's our time. Now's our time to shine and to say, okay, yeah, let's make this bigger than what it is. Let's hold on to that and let's continue. And I love the aspect of like having people to dig deep and think and reflect on something that they were maybe used to having and it wasn't there, and then it had to be made accessible. How did that feel? How was that navigating resources? How was that figuring it out? How was that finding someone to help you? There's so much that goes into it.
Right, exactly. So that's our challenge for our
Yeah.
listeners, is
Yeah.
to think about those experiences for sure and reflect, and then try to act upon things as much as we can too. And then what that looks like for me has been like online space, since that's where I mostly am these days, is like, how can I make what I'm doing online more accessible? And kind of, I recognize that in the pandemic, I was like, oh, even like down to my marketing level, a lot of what I was posting wasn't necessarily accessible for everybody. And I had to reflect on that and be like, I'm serving individuals with disabilities. They should be able to access my post. So I've added like image descriptions. I try to get transcriptions out for this podcast as quick as I can, captions as much as I can. And I'm still learning like all the time from disability self-advocates on like just things I wouldn't think of, kind of like you were saying with like, you just don't think about these things until maybe you experience or maybe somebody tells you. And so
Right.
to build that awareness of like, oh, like these are other people's experiences, and we can adapt things to make it so that they can access what we're like providing, like sharing. I'm sharing fun stuff online, I think, and I would love, I want people to accept, like, have that and not be like, oh, I can't, she didn't put an image description, so I can't see this picture and I can't
Exactly.
enjoy the content.
Yeah, I would say that that's been a huge thing that I've definitely been seeing lately just on Instagram, social media, is image descriptions. And I'm like, wow, this is amazing, and then I'm seeing more captions and I'm like, this is incredible, and it comes back to it truly takes people experiencing things and finding out. And it's not a bad thing that you didn't know before. Like there's a lot of things we can't be exposed to everything all the time. But like you're saying, I think it takes talking about it. It takes experiencing it, or it takes telling someone. And so I think also in this community with adults and individuals with disability, going back to the empowerment of speaking up for themselves and learning how to advocate for themselves and tell others, hey, it would be helpful if your business or if you did X, Y, and Z because this is this is difficult for me and this would make it easier. Like, and not being afraid to stand up for themselves, not being afraid to say, hey, I can't access your business or whatever it may be in the community because there's not a wheelchair ramp. How do you have that conversation? Like
Mm-hmm.
there's just lots of different things. So yeah, going back to how do people know, like if they don't even experience it, and it's creating advocates, it's creating that empowerment space for individuals that we work with to say, hey, speak up for yourself, let's show the people what this community is about and bring that awareness.
Yeah, expanding on that. And I think it's also like the flip side too. Like us as professionals need to listen.
Yes.
And I loved what you said about like it's okay like you didn't know if you just didn't know. And
Yeah.
to kind of give ourselves that grace, because I think it could be easy to respond in a defensive way because we're humans and it's but to try to stop and listen before getting defensive and give ourselves as professionals like that grace, and then make the change, make the accessibility, I think is what we professionals need to work towards. So yes, definitely helping self-advocates, helping them advocate, getting their voices out, but then we need to be ready to listen.
Yes, I love that you brought that up too, because I even, in the talk of all this, I've had to step back and say, man, I didn't know that. I should have known that, or, I should have done more research before. But like you're saying, stepping back and giving myself grace and say, well, I didn't know that before, but someone had the courage to tell me. So now I can move forward. Thank them, like make that experience a great experience. And yeah, like you're saying, stopping before responding, giving ourselves grace. And then now we just have something more that we can pass on to other people. And I think that's truly what helps, awareness and the community grow. So yeah, I definitely agree with that too.
Yeah, 100%. What an important conversation. So
I
hopefully our
know.
listeners can take that away and again kind of challenge themselves to think about their experiences and to listen and to help self-advocates. I think there's a lot of takeaways just in that little part of our conversation.
I agree, because some of it can, like you're saying, it can be hard conversations to have. It can, if you're coming to someone with, and this is anything too, if you're coming to someone with any type of feedback, it's like, how do I not come off as rude or mean or, like, so sometimes even just having that conversation is hard. And then once you have it, what's going to happen after that? So, yeah, I absolutely think just giving the community to the awareness of giving yourselves grace, giving grace to those who came to you, because that was a hard thing to do too. Surrounding all of that, I think society right now and everyone, we all need to just give each other a little more grace because all we're all going through something in some way, even before the pandemic. But I think, now more than
Now, at the
ever.
very least,
Yeah.
as a pandemic, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, wow, if I already didn't have problems or issues, whoo, now they're just heightened and we're all just experiencing so many new things too that makes it that much more difficult. But the awareness of you never know what someone's going through on the face of things. I think I try to, I'm that type of person that, like, if I'm driving and someone cuts me off or, they're speeding past or something crazy, I'm like, I have the initial reaction of, oh my gosh, what just happened? And then, wow, I wonder if they're stressed and trying to get to work or they just spilled coffee. I'm that type of person that always goes to that. Like, I never know what they're going through, but I know not everyone is. So I think it's important just to bring that awareness and to kind of keep that grace in the back of our mind for ourselves and others when we interact.
Definitely. Well, circling back a little bit, I also want to make sure we touch on mindfulness, which was touched in the yoga discussion, of course, but just even mindfulness in its own. I feel like maybe this is more music therapy centered, but I feel like that's not always a goal when working with adults with disabilities. It's usually very transition, job skills heavy, which is important too. And then sometimes like cognitive, that's not always my favorite because they're working on like academic skills, and I'm like, they're 20, they're out of school.
I know.
Stop with those goals. And socialization's big goal too, and that's
Right.
important. But I feel like sometimes that emotional mindfulness piece gets left out. Not always in music therapy, but sometimes I've seen that in circles. So I want to touch on that. What is the importance of mindfulness, and how do you approach that with your experiences with adults with disabilities?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just surrounding everything that you said, with we have everyone out there, helping with job skills and social skills and interactions and movement. And it's like, okay, that's all good. And then, but how do we even get to those things? So that's really what I see as the foundation of it all, is creating that mindfulness. And really what that means, I think, going back to that initial yoga conversation, learning your body, knowing your body. That's truly like the deep root of mindfulness, right? Like when we think of mindfulness and it's like being in the moment, being present, like that's like, are we ever truly present? It's like, I may be for a snippet. It's hard, right? Our mind is constantly thinking ahead or what's coming next. So I think the mindfulness piece is important in creating the foundation of how we live our days. So creating that to learn our bodies, to learn when I'm in this situation, my breathing starts to get short. We put a name to that, right? Like I start to get anxious or stressed, or maybe I don't know what this is. So mindfulness truly helps us step back, know our body, know our reactions, so that then we can help ourselves in those moments. And I think that's where music therapy comes in and social skills come in and the yoga movement comes in. That's where all these things come in. So the mindfulness piece is knowing, learning our body, being in this space, and then what can we do with that?
Right.
So what coping skills can you use when your breathing gets fast? Like what are things that we can teach and so that people can learn and use in the community? I always emphasize that. I'm like, here are different techniques. these are the times you can use it. And then I also challenge you to find different ways you can use it for your body. So even I know I'm about to go into this space that makes me super stressed out. So before I even get there, I'm going to do these three things that I know help me. That's mindfulness. You're bringing that mindful moment and just knowing your body. And sometimes, people are more in tune with themselves. I would say that years and years of work just within myself, I find new things all the time that come up. I'm like, okay, how do I deal with this today? Or same reaction, different day, different moment. It changes all the time, right? And also teaching the okayness of accepting that we may not always know what's going to come next, and we may not always know our body in that moment, but how can we move forward? And that's what I think the importance of all the other skills we've talked about, that I work with, that you work with, and a lot of other people in the community works with. That's what I think truly helps individuals thrive, is because they can continue to learn their bodies deeper, and they may find things, oh, I really enjoy, you know, this one yoga movement or this one breath exercise, or even I know in this moment I need to call a friend or text a friend and talk to them because that's going to help me, calm down or whatever it is. And I'm just using stress and anxiety as a example, but I think we can kind of all relate to that in different ways. What does it mean when my breathing gets short and fast? What does it mean when my hands start shaking? It shows up in our body in different ways. But I think through the mindfulness piece and work, the different work that we do, we're able to kind of bring awareness to all individuals. And again, going back to each individual is different. Each concept, technique, therapy, each thing is going to resonate with individuals different. So as professionals, it's important for us to listen, to listen and to truly say, you know your body best. I'm just here to help, and also help them identify things. The list goes on and on, but the awareness of learning yourself, learning reactions and things that come up for you, things that come up for in your routine, or how to handle things when things get crazy and nothing is going as planned. So I really think, my focus on the whole mindfulness piece too is that's the foundation of getting all these skills and techniques and therapies to work. Is we've kind of got to start at the baseline of us as a whole, inside and outside.
Oh, there's so many good points in there. I love how you tied it back to like listening, like
Yes.
not just with like advocacy stuff, but also like, well, that is advocacy stuff too,
Yeah.
in a way, yeah.
Yeah.
And listening to what they're saying about their bodies and how it's the foundation. Mindfulness is the foundation. I love that too, because I think as important job skills are, obviously jobs can give us this purpose in life for different individuals, and we can feel a satisfaction from jobs. And that's why that's why a lot of adults with disabilities, I feel like that's one of the reasons that's such a big goal, is like that purpose piece. But at the end of the day, if they're not thriving,
Yeah.
they're not having that mindfulness connection, if they're not having fun,
Right.
if they're not
Yeah.
emotionally balanced, what's a job going to do?
Yeah.
And that's for
Like,
anybody.
definitely. I love that. And I love how you talk about purpose. Like, what is our purpose? And for us in the community as professionals, but also like, what's the purpose of the individual that we work with? Is it to create robots and for everyone to be the same? And it's not. That's not realistic. I think purpose here comes back to, like we've talked about, the fun. I've worked in a lot of different places where it's like, okay, we teach these social skills, and then so that they can be like this in class, and then we can do this in the community, and they can get this job. And it's like, okay, that's great, right? Because we need those foundational skills. Like, I've had some parents have goals of, they like to do a family pre-COVID, a family dinner like at a restaurant somewhere that they enjoyed, and they love trying new places. And it was hard for an individual to be in a restaurant in a public place, whether it was too loud or overstimulated or whatever it may be. So sometimes those were goals. And it's like, yeah, okay, that's great. Goals to have as a family and to be in the community or whatnot. And yeah, bringing it back to, okay, well, what about what the individual wants?
Mm.
What do, what, aside from like the work and life thing, how can they also have fun? Because I've thought many times, I can be out in the community, I can choose what I want to do, and maybe today I want to go to the gym, and maybe tomorrow I want to find a fun place to visit. And sometimes that isn't always accessible to individuals. So finding that, and I'm super passionate about how can we make this happen for someone, especially when you see someone just light up in doing something that they thought maybe they weren't really going to get to do before.
I love that so much, and I feel like you almost took what I said and flipped it a bit, and I love it because you're like, I feel like almost what you're touching at is saying like, can't our purpose just to be and to like be happy and to be joyful? And I think that's a reflection of society that, people who work tend to have like more value in society and what in our American society.
Yeah,
And that's, problematic. That's like a whole other
I
podcast
know.
episode.
I could talk for days on that
Because
subject alone.
I have a feeling like I need to be productive all the time, and it's just that's like society telling me. And you can see this reflected a little bit with adults with disabilities, that there is so much of this focus on job training, almost like they're not valuable unless they have a job. And I'm not saying that, I'm just saying like that's what
Right.
culture can kind of push sometimes. And I'm also not, also some like you can find purpose in a job too, so I'm not saying like job training's
Right.
bad either.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's definitely a balance, like work-life balance, but I think you can argue in American society that people who work tend to be like valued more. You can even see that with older adults.
Mhm.
Once people get older and retire, there's like sometimes weird perspectives
Yeah.
about even older adults and people who aren't working. But yeah, why can't our purpose just to be and to be happy and to be aware of ourselves? And I feel like you were touching on that, and I was like, oh, like chills, because
Yeah.
I feel like with music, with yoga, that's sometimes my goal when I go into a session. It's not like, well, I'm about to use a bad example because I hate this goal, but it's not like eye contact, which I don't use in my sessions anymore because I
Same.
find that problematic. But that is a very common goal in
Yeah.
therapy, like
It
making
is.
eye contact. Why not just having a good time? Like, why can't
Right.
we use that in therapy?
Right. I've had a lot, yeah, I think especially starting off in our profession and working with individuals in this population, there's a lot of things that we learn by book, right?
Mhm.
There's a lot of those foundational things that we learn by book. So yeah, a lot of times I used to see and still do that that's like one of the first goals. And I agree. I'm like, why can't we just be? I've had a lot of individuals express to me, that deep eye contact and just like trying to focus in on someone is overstimulating. So I prefer to like look at a blank wall, but I'm listening. I prefer to like turn this way for this reason because of the lighting, but I'm still listening. And I'm like, great. I know that I'm expressing something in a way that they understand. And if I'm not, I modify in whatever that may be. But yeah, I guess even before, now that you mentioned that, I'm like, oh, I didn't realize I was going on that track. But totally, like, why can't we just be? Like, I'm not experiencing what that person is experiencing in their body, so I don't know what's happening in the moment. But I trust that they're taking in whatever information is happening in the moment, and I'm allowing them to be as their own human being. I'm allowing them to empower that moment for themselves without saying, oh no, you have to be this way. Like we have to do things like this, and that ties into yoga, that ties into mental health, and there's different modifications for different poses. A lot of times I would, even just starting off in yoga too, I would start off a foundation. All right, here's tree pose. You can start, kickstand on the floor. You can bring up to your calf, or for a deeper stretch or more advanced, to your thigh. But I'm like, why is that more advanced? So now even my language is changing around that, right? Like Modify for your body. Like, what feels good to you? Is it at your thigh? Great. Is it on the floor? Great. It's all good because it's serving that individual. I think, talking about society and everything, we have to let go of what we think is right. We have to let go of that like societal norm and what's supposed to be and what we're supposed to do. We have to let go of those things so that we can give space for individuals to be themselves. And that's what I think, at least that's what I try to really focus on in any session, group that I'm in, going back to like, how do we empower individuals to be them? And like we're saying, yeah, sometimes work can be super fulfilling for us, but that's not all we serve as individuals. So bringing in the piece of how do you still be yourself and be you without the expectations,
Right.
which is even, hard for me sometimes too. We think about at what age you're at, what profession you're doing, how successful you are. A lot of times that weighs us down because we tie that to our identity. And it's truly, how do we separate that from us to know that at the end of the day, I may not be successful as Joe across the street, but I'm still me. I'm still a human. I'm still proud of who I am. So, how do we allow people to, separate from those expectations and separate from all these things to still say, you're you? And you're the only you. Isn't that like Dr. Seuss quote? Or there's this Dr. Seuss quote in there. So you're the only you. It's something like, now I have to look that up.
I'll
But
try to, if I remember, I'll put that in the show notes.
okay. There's a Dr. Seuss quote for everything, right?
Right, exactly.
But yeah, I think in the community and what we do for individuals, that's how I look at it. Like, how can I empower an individual to be the most them and comfortable with them that they can be? Because sometimes, as we mentioned with different things, society can kind of make us look at ourselves and be like, am I enough? Like, I don't look like the next person, or I don't act like that. So, am I doing this right? Or is it okay that I'm this way? And it's truly, how can we separate from that? And how can we teach others to accept themselves?
So good. So good. Well, I think we're wrapping up a bit, but I feel like that's
Yeah.
such a perfect note to kind of leave on. So, as we're wrapping up, are there any other resources you want to share with listeners or any other information, anything we didn't get to that you really want to say?
And I was able to share a lot of what I wanted to just with what I provide, and we provide at Guided by Humanity. There's a lot of resources there. You can find us at guidedbyhumanity.org. We have a website and Instagram as well. So, tons of resources always shared there for the community. Did have one thing that I wanted to share with everyone going on my theme of grounding this morning, this week. Sometimes I even forget what day. I started off my day super hectic. I dropped my coffee and then I was grabbing my water. I spilt my water. I was all over the place. So it brought me to, okay, what do I need? Again, reflecting on what do I need in this moment? Grounding technique. I need to kind of settle in, and how do I do that? So, one thing I wanted to share with everyone that I love doing, especially in the moment, that can be just super quick and easy, bring us back to our space, is find one thing you can see, name that object, see that object, kind of settle in with that for a little bit, then move on to one thing you can hear. I like to focus on, sometimes there are little sounds in the room that we may not notice. Like sometimes I'm sitting there and I can hear electronics, I think are like the biggest thing. Sometimes you just have this little buzzing sound that we don't hear throughout our day. So that just kind of helps us, or maybe it's the air conditioner turning on. So it's another way to help ground. One thing you can smell that's surrounding you. Some things you have to dig a little deeper for because you're like, is there a scent around me? And sometimes it's like, oh, it's the sweater I'm wearing. Then moving on to one thing you can taste, whether it's grabbing a snack for yourself or it's something, that you already have in your mouth or you can taste, or maybe I sometimes like to think of there's a taste in my mouth, but it doesn't have a name. So just focusing on different things. So that's really going through our senses. And what that just helps us truly do is ground ourselves in the actual space that we're in right now. So it helps us see our surroundings. Oh, and feel. One thing you can feel too. So it helps us see our surroundings, feel it, hear it, and help us just be in the moment a little more. And if it's something just quick, just focus on one thing you can see. If it's something you need to grasp quick in the moment, instead of thinking about a list of things, you can always make it quick or adjust, as you needed. But I wanted to share that with everyone today. And hopefully that is something that each one of you can just take on throughout your day, and hopefully it just helps you ground a little more and be in your space a little more and help you in the moment.
Thank you. I'm going to try to remember to use that myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Just think about your senses. And sometimes I forgot touch. So it's like sometimes you may do them all or others, but if we just kind of go through our senses too, it just helps us kind of stop and slow down. Because this morning when I was just spilling things all over the place, I was like, I need to slow down. So I think we can all kind of relate to those moments, whether it's we're running late, we're in a rut, whatever it may be, but helping us truly slow down and be in the moment.
Awesome. Well, Kathleen, where can listeners find you?
You can find me at beyondmentalspace.com. I'm currently revamping my website, so hopefully when this podcast airs and in the future it will be up and running. You can find offerings there, any workshops that I'll be going through, more information about me. Also on Instagram at Beyond Mental Space, and my email, Kathleen, KATHLEEN, at beyondmentalspace.com.
Awesome. And we'll make sure that's all in the show notes too, so that listeners can find it easily and check out more resources from you.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Kathleen. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I always enjoy good conversation with you.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Kathleen and conversation as much as I did. It was so refreshing, and Kathleen had so many awesome perspectives in her work and in her work with adults with disabilities. And I think some of the biggest takeaways are that the piece with mindfulness and body awareness, and that, individuals know their bodies best and different things are going to be comfortable for different individuals, and working with the individual to be aware of their body and also what feels good for their body in moments of mindfulness, because not everything's going to work for everybody, or some things might need to be adapted or tweaked for each individual we work with, and even for ourselves when we do different mindfulness techniques. So I love that approach of helping the individual really explore their own bodies in a very non-judgmental way to find what fits their needs the best, and how our needs can be having fun. Our purpose can be having fun, and having a high quality positive life can be a goal for some of our clients. It doesn't always have to be work. It doesn't always have to be the super goal driven, highly product based kind of goal. It can be process based. It could be what helps us have a fulfilling life, what feels good in our bodies. And I thought that conversation was very interesting and made me think about my sessions differently that day. And as I go forward too, it's like we can just work on having fun, on being, and find purpose in that. And I thought it was good that we touched on ableism as well too, and how in different circles and different, well, if we're honest, in almost every aspect of our society probably, there's ableism, and in yoga that can appear in spaces where there are more advanced techniques. There you're kind of pushed to have this perfect fit body, which just doesn't exist, one, and then two is just this fabric of society, because every body is worthy and every body is perfect in its own right. So instead of making yoga something where we have to achieve this ableistic view, using yoga, using music, using our different practices to make it something where we can meet the individual, make it adaptable, make it accessible, and make it where the goal isn't this unachievable societal pressure, and instead is just what is best for this client that we're working with, for this individual we're working with, what's best for their body, what's best for their interests, and really honing in on that and trying to cultivate that in our practices. So thanks again for Kathleen for coming on. I was really inspired by this conversation, and we hadn't planned about going in the directions we did, and it just happened naturally in conversation, and I hope that can spark conversations going forward. Challenge yourself, like we talked about in the episode, to think about how maybe the pandemic made something less accessible to you, and how for some people with disabilities that's a much larger gap. And how can we hone into our empathy to make things more accessible and to listen? Listening was such a big takeaway from this episode as well too. How can we listen to those with disabilities and what they're telling us so that we can make sure we have the most ethical practices, that we're doing the least amount of harm as possible, and just providing the best services for our clients and for what our clients want and what their needs are, and not necessarily what we think their needs are. So I'm gonna reflect and think about this a lot myself too, and I hope that this episode can help you reflect about your practices as well too. So yeah, we'll move into the last part of the episode where I go over the outline for the music therapy session plan of the month. First is Hello, Let's Make Some Music, Let's Be Together by me. And then a movement song, Melt the Snow Down. Again, original song by myself. Valentine's Day, Name That Tune. And then a sensory songwriting song, the mantra song that I wrote, actually in collaboration with Kathleen. We're hoping maybe to do some workshops together, and her work inspired me to write this song and gave me some ideas to write this song. And then Goodbye is my normal goodbye song, Na Na Hey Kiss 'Em Goodbye by Steam. I just really like that structure and closing out the session. So it's a very quick outline. You can get the full breakdown, and I'm going to do a live implementation video the Friday after this episode comes out. I'll go over the breakdown live with my patron group. And so on patreon.com/navigating adulthood and IDD, I have a community for professionals working with adults with disabilities where I make a monthly music therapy session plan, and I go over the plan in a more detailed breakdown, and as well as provide resources related to the plan. And episodes come out a week early, ad-free, and we also have a Facebook community, and like we are meeting on Friday to go over live, we have a monthly Zoom call where we can have peer supervision and workshop things that are going on in sessions with each other, get ideas for new activities. This is not limited to music therapists. Right now it's all music therapists, but I am a music therapist, so it makes sense that's who I'm attracting. But if you're not a music therapist and this sounds interesting, and if you're a professional that works with adults with IDD, we would love to talk about how you can use music in sessions as well too, and in our peer supervision, we can not just focus on music, but in providing the best services for our clients and have those kind of discussions as well too. It's open for any professional that works with individuals with disabilities, and we would love to have you in the community. It's $5 a month at patreon.com/navigating adulthood and IDD. And if this is something you're interested in, you can always sign up and just remember to unsubscribe before the next month. If you just want to check it out, see if the Zoom meetings are a good fit. It's a monthly subscription, but you can cancel it at any time with Patreon. So you could kind of schedule that out, like, oh, maybe I'll try a month, maybe I'll try a couple months, or whatever works for you and your budget. Other ways to support the podcast are continuing to listen, sharing with people you think would like it, and rating us on iTunes. And one more announcement. If you're in the Patreon community, this week is our 5-day challenge for disability providers, and each day I'll be going live at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. And if you're listening to this as not a community member, you'll be hearing this the week after the challenge. So last week we did a 5-day challenge. And each day I went over a different prompt, and there are 5 posts you can make. And you can still participate in this if you want to. If you make 5 posts, tagging Navigating Adulthood and IDD and following Navigating Adulthood and IDD on Instagram, this Instagram challenge, if you make the 5 posts, 5 prompts, and tag the account, you'll be entered in a giveaway. The winner will be randomly drawn and will win a $25 gift card to Amazon, a free month in the Navigator community I was just going on about. There are 12 session plans available as of this podcast, and you have a chance to be on this podcast as a guest, winning the prize as well too. And so that is still open until the 27th, which will be the Saturday after this episode comes out. So you have one more week if you want to make 5 posts and join our 5-day disability provider challenge. So thanks for listening. Join in the challenge if you feel like that's something you'd be interested in. Otherwise, I will catch you next month in the next episode, and I might mix up our schedule. There might be more episodes in March. Stay tuned and see what happens on Navigating Adulthood and IDD. This podcast is by Rhythmic Roots Music Services, LLC, with content and music produced by Bonnie Haupt. Thanks for listening.